Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the live studios here at Radha Lane, ISKCON of Houston, right next to Shri Shri Nila Madhava, beautiful mandir. And we've reached the 5th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. We're hearing about the process of creation. But before we do, we're going to glorify the Bhagavatam congregationally by chanting the Bhagavata Mahima Stotra by Srila Sanatana Goswami, the senior disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kaligdwandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Manistadagamad Bhagya Madadandana Mostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy. I bow down to you. Asadu, sadhu tadayin, atine chutatakara, hanamun jagadachin mam, premnarit gantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've reached 24, verse 24 of the 5th chapter of the second verse, second canto. And the process of creation is being described. So if you're not following along day by day, coming in the middle of this is a little bit, weighty. It's a little bit challenging. But what's basically happening is how the material nature transforms from one aspect to another. It starts out just the undifferentiated material energy. It's like all the atoms just in a cloud, right? And then Krishna glances, Mahavishnu glances, and the souls are injected, and time is injected, and the seeds of the universe has come out of the Lord's body, and then they go into that cloud, and then the energy, which is including the souls and time, they coagulate around those different seeds of the universe, right? And therefore all the souls go to the place they're supposed to be. In the universe they belong in, according to what they were like before, what their mentality was like in the previous creation. And then from there, Krishna continues to activate, through his glance and through the time. And then everything starts to coagulate and transform. And that energy, which was the pradhan, which is just undifferentiated material energy, it changes and it becomes the Mahatattva. Now we're going to hear how the Mahatattva divides into, or part of it, divides into the three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And now the false ego is being manifested, and then the modes of nature will be created. So that's where we are. Just to keep you up, catch you up, in case you haven't been watching. Okay? Verse 24. The self-centered, materialistic ego, thus being transformed into three features, becomes known as the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, in three divisions. Namely, the powers that evolve matter, knowledge of material creations, and the intelligence that guides materialistic activities. Narada, you are quite competent to understand this. Remember, the question that prompted all these answers is Narada asking, are you God? He's talking to his father, Brahma, who was the original person, and everything seems to come out of him in the very beginning. Before, Swayambhu Manu and Sadarupa, the first male and female humans, come and unite and then start having children. Before that, it's all coming out of Brahma's body and mind. So it looks like he's God. So he's asking, but he's in meditation. He's doing austerity. So why should you be doing austerity if you're God? So he's inquiring, and that's the basis of this section of the Bhagavatam. Okay, purport. Materialistic ego, or the sense of identification with matter, is grossly self-centered, devoid of clear knowledge of the existence of God. And this self-centered egoism of the materialistic living entities is the cause of their being conditioned by other paraphernalia and continuing their bondage of material existence. In the Bhagavad Gita, this self-centered egoism is very nicely explained in the 7th chapter, verses 24 through 27. The self-centered impersonalist, without a clear conception of the personality of Godhead, concludes in his own way that the personality of Godhead takes a material shape from his original, impersonal, spiritual existence for a particular mission. And this misleading conception of the Supreme Lord by the self-centered impersonalist continues even though he is seen to be very interested in the Vedic literatures, such as the Brahma Sutras and other highly intellectual sources of knowledge. This you see in India a lot. There's lots of people who study the Vedas in India, not so much in the West. And most of them are impersonalists, and the foggiest idea who Krishna is. The impersonalist thus cannot conceive of the Lord's eternal spiritual form, of eternal knowledge, bliss, and existence. The reason is that the Lord reserves the right of not exposing himself to the non-devotee, who, even after a thorough study of literatures, like the Bhagavad Gita, remains an impersonalist simply by obstinacy. Here comes the obstinacy, the obstinate material energy calling us, no, come over here, come over here. I got so many nice things on this train, you might be interested in something. This obstinacy is due to the action of Yogamaya, a personal energy of the Lord that acts like an aide-de-camp by covering the vision of the obstinate impersonalist. Such a bewildered human being is described as mudha, or grossly ignorant, because he is unable to understand the transcendental form of the Lord as being unborn and unchangeable. If it were true that the Lord takes a form or material shape from his original impersonal feature, then that would mean he takes birth and is changeable from impersonal to personal. But he is not changeable, nor does he ever take a new birth like a conditioned soul. The conditioned soul may take a form, birth after birth, due to his conditional existence in matter, but the self-centered impersonalists, by their gross ignorance, accept the Lord as one of them because of self-centered egoism, even after so-called advancement of knowledge in the Vedanta. The Lord, being situated in the heart of every individual living entity, knows very well the tendency of such conditioned souls in terms of past, present, and future. But the bewildered conditioned soul hardly can know him in his eternal form. By the will of the Lord, therefore, the impersonalist, even after knowing the Brahman and Paramatma features of the Lord, remains ignorant of his eternal personal feature as ever existing Narayana, transcendental to all material creation. The cause of such gross ignorance is constant engagement by the materialistic man in the matter of artificially increasing material demands. To realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one has to purify the materialistic senses by devotional service. The mode of goodness, or the Brahminical culture recommended in the Vedic literatures, is helpful to such spiritual realization. And thus, the Jnana Shakti stage of the conditioned soul is comparatively better than the other two stages, namely Dravya Shakti and Kriya Shakti. The whole material civilization is manifested by a huge accumulation of materials, or in other words, raw materials for industrial purposes and the industrial enterprises, Kriya Shakti. That means activity. Kriya Shakti means the potency to act and create and move, are all due to gross ignorance of spiritual life. In order to rectify this great anomaly of materialistic civilization based on the principles of Dravya Shakti and Kriya Shakti, one has to adopt the process of devotional service of the Lord by adoption of the principles of Karma Yoga, mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as follows: Yat karoshi, yad ashnasi, yat jahosi didasi yat tapasyasi kauntaya, tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. 25. From the darkness of false ego, the first of the five elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen. Purport. The five elements, namely sky, air, fire, water, and earth, are all but different qualities of the darkness of false ego. This means that the false ego, in the sum total form of Mahatattva, is generated from the marginal potency of the Lord, and due to this false ego of lording it over the material creation, ingredients are generated for the false enjoyment of a living being. This means that the souls that were injected into this beginning of the creation all have unfulfilled material desires. So it's that unfulfilled karmic desires that push them into the material world, put them into different places, and cause them to they're not exactly causing it, but indirectly they're causing the reactions to form the material world, to fulfill their desires. So in a sense, they are the cause of the happiness and distresses in this material world. Because if it wasn't for them, the material world wouldn't need to exist. This is the proof that the Lord doesn't do this just for His satisfaction. He's not creating the material world so that we'll suffer and He can enjoy watching us suffer. It's not like that. He creates it for our pleasure, and then how we deal with it dictates, how it develops and what we do or don't do so So therefore it says here, due to this false ego of lording it over material creation, ingredients are generated for the false enjoyment of living being. Practically speaking, the living being is a dominating factor over the material elements as the enjoyer, though the background is the Supreme Lord. Factually, save and except the Lord, no one can be called the enjoyer, but the living entity falsely desires to become the enjoyer. This is the origin of false ego. When the bewildered living being desires this, the shadow elements are generated by the will of the Lord, and the living entities are allowed to run after them as after a phantasmagoria. It is said that first the Tanmatra sound is created, and then the sky. And in this verse, it is confirmed that actually it is so. But sound is the subtle form of the sky, and the distinction is like that between the seer and the seen. The sound is the representation of the actual object, as the sound produced when one describes the object gives an idea of the object. Therefore, sound is the subtle characteristic of the object. Similarly, the sound representation of the Lord, in terms of his characteristics, is the complete form of the Lord, as was seen by Vasudeva and Maharaj Dasharat, the fathers of Lord Krishna and Lord Rama. The sound representation of the Lord is not different from the Lord himself, because the Lord and his representation in sound are absolute knowledge. Lord Chaitanya has instructed us that in the holy name of the Lord, a sound representation of the Lord, all the potencies of the Lord are invested. Thus one can immediately enjoy the association of the Lord by the pure vibration of the sound representation of his holy name. And the concept of the Lord is immediately manifested before the pure devotee. A pure devotee, therefore, is not aloof from the Lord, even for a moment. The holy name of the Lord, as recommended in the Shastras, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, may therefore be constantly chanted by the devotee aspiring to be constantly in touch with the Supreme Lord. One who is thus able to associate with the Lord is sure to be delivered from the darkness of the created world, which is a product of false ego. Tamasima Jyotir Gama. Text 26 through 29. Because the sky is transformed, the air is generated with the quality of touch. And by previous succession, the air is also full of sound and the basic principles of duration of life. Sense perception, mental power, and bodily strength. When the air is transformed in course of time and nature's course, fire is generated, taking shape with the sense of touch and sound. Since fire is also transformed, there is a manifestation of water, full of juice and taste. As previously, it also has form and touch, and is also full of sound. And water, being transformed from all variegatedness on earth, appears odorous, and, as previously, becomes qualitatively full of juice, touch, sound, and form. Purport. The whole process of creation is an act of gradual evolution and development from one element to another, reaching up to the variegatedness of the earth as so many trees, plants, mountains, rivers, reptiles, birds, animals, and varieties of human beings. The quality of sense perception is also evolutionary, namely generated from sound, then touch, and from touch to form. Taste and odor are also generated along with the gradual development of sky, air, fire, water, and earth. They are all mutually the cause and effect of one another. But the original cause is the Lord himself in his plenary portion as Mahavishnu, lying in the causal ocean of the Mahat Tattva. As such, Lord Krishna is described in the Brahma Samhita as the cause of all causes. And this is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita as follows. Ahang sarvasya prabhavo mattak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhavha samanvitaha. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. The qualities of sense perception are fully represented by the earth, in the earth, and they are manifested in other elements to a lesser extent. In the sky there is sound only, whereas in the air there are sound and touch. In the fire there are sound, touch, and shape, or form. And in water there is taste also, along with other perceptions, namely sound, touch, and shape. In the earth, however, there are all the above mentioned qualities with an extra development of odor also. Therefore on the earth there is a full display of variegatedness of life, which is originally started with the basic principle of air. Diseases of the body take place due to derangement of air within the earthly body of the living beings. Mental diseases result from special derangement of the air within the body. And as such, yogic exercise is especially beneficial to keep the air in order so that diseases of the body become almost nil by such exercises. When they are properly done, the duration of life also increases, and one can have control over death also by such practices. A perfect yogi can have command over death and quit the body at the right moment when he is competent to transfer himself to a suitable planet. The bhakti yogi, however, surpasses all other yogis because, by dint of his devotional service, he is promoted to the region beyond the spirit and material sky and placed in one of the planets in the spiritual sky by the supreme will of the Lord, the controller of everything. Text 30. From the motive goodness, the mind is generated and becomes manifest, as also the 10 demigods controlling the bodily movements. Such demigods are known as the controller of the directions, the controller of the air, the sun god, Varuna, the Ashwini Kumaras, the fire god, the king of heaven, the worshipable deity in heaven, the chief of the Adityas, and Brahmaji, the Prajapati, all come into existence. Purport. Vaikarika is the neutral stage of creation, and Tejas is the initiative of creation. Now, one thing you should understand here that is not so easy to pick up on when the first time you read it through, and that is that this creation is called Sarga. This is the creation within the mind of Mahavishnu. In other words, all these elements and all the parts of the creation, they come first on a subtle plane. Then they come. Then when he expands himself into all the different universes, and Brahma comes out of his navel stem, then all those subtle energies, they come through Brahma, and then he puts them out and manifests them in the gross creation. So he's the actual engineer, Brahma, but he's got the blueprint and the ingredients to put it together. Just like these guys out here, they're building this building out here. You see the guys with the pipes and the guys with the machines that are digging out and doing everything, and gradually it's going to come up. But they got the engineers got the blueprint and this and that. But the people who actually own the place, they're the ones that are getting all that stuff together. They conceive what they want. So like that. Okay. Purport. Vaikarika is the neutral stage of creation, and Tejas is the initiative of creation, while Tamas is the full display of material creation, under the spell of the darkness of ignorance. May you get better. To tweet. Or as we say in India, jaldi, right away, quickly, get better. Haribo. Manufacture of the, quote, necessities of life, end quote, in factories and workshops, excessively prominent in the age of Kali, or in the age of the machine, is the summit stage of the quality of darkness. Such manufacturing enterprises by human society are in the mode of darkness because, factually, there is no necessity for the commodities manufactured. Human society primarily requires food for subsistence, shelter for sleeping, defense for protection, and commodities for satisfaction of the senses. The senses are the practical signs of life, as will be explained in the next verse. Human civilization is meant for purifying the senses, and objects of sense satisfaction should be supplied as much as absolutely required, but not for aggravating artificial sensory needs. Food, shelter, defense, and sense gratification are all needs in material existence. Otherwise, in its pure, uncontaminated state of original life, the living entity has no such needs. The needs are therefore artificial. We'll let this train go by. The needs are therefore artificial, and in the pure stage of life, there are no such needs. As such, increasing the artificial needs, as is the standard of material civilization, or advancing the economic development of human society, is a sort of engagement in darkness without knowledge. By such engagement, human energy is spoiled, because human energy is primarily meant for purifying the senses in order to engage them in satisfying the senses of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord, being the supreme possessor of spiritual senses, is the master of the senses. Rishikesha. Rishika means the senses, and Isha means the master. The Lord is not the servant of the senses, or in other words, He is not directed by the dictation of the senses, but the conditioned souls, or the individual living entities, are servants of the senses. They are conducted by the direction or dictation of the senses, and therefore material civilization is a kind of engagement in sense gratification only. The standard of human civilization should be to cure the disease of sense gratification, and one can do this simply by becoming an agent for satisfying the spiritual senses of the Lord. The senses are never to be stopped in their engagements, but one should purify them by engaging them in the pure service of the sense gratification of the master of the senses. This is the instruction of the whole Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna wanted first of all to satisfy his own senses by his decision not to fight with his kinsmen and friends. But Lord Sri Krishna taught him the Bhagavad Gita just to purify Arjuna's decision for sense gratification. Therefore Arjuna agreed to satisfy the senses of the Lord, and thus he fought the battle of Kurukshetra as the Lord desired. The Vedas instruct us to get out of the existence of darkness and go forward on the path of light. Tamasi ma jyotirgama. The path of light is therefore to satisfy the senses of the Lord. Misguided men, or less intelligent men, follow the path of self-realization without any attempt to satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord by following the path shown by Arjuna and other devotees of the Lord. On the contrary, they artificially try to stop the activities of the senses the yoga system. Or they deny the transcendental senses of the Lord, the jnana system. The devotees, however, are above the yogis and the jnanis, because pure devotion do not deny the sense, because pure devotees do not deny the senses of the Lord. They want to satisfy the senses of the Lord. Only because of the darkness of ignorance do the yogis and jnanis deny the senses of the Lord, and thus artificially try to control the activities of the diseased senses. In the diseased condition of the senses, there is too much engagement of these senses in increasing material needs. When one comes to see the disadvantage of aggravating the sense activities, one is called a jnani. And when one tries to stop the activities of the senses by practice of yogic principles, he is called a yogi. But when one is fully aware of the transcendental senses of the Lord and tries to satisfy his senses, one is called a devotee of the Lord. Hear that again? You want to hear that again? That was pretty good. Yeah, this is good. This is really good. So clear. Let's go back to the... In the diseased condition of the senses, there is too much engagement of the senses in increasing material needs. When one comes to see the disadvantage of aggravating the sense activities, one is called a jnani. And when one tries to stop the activities of the senses by the practice of yogic principles, he is called a yogi. But when one is fully aware of the transcendental senses of the Lord and tries to satisfy his senses, one is called a devotee of the Lord. The devotees of the Lord do not try to deny the senses of the Lord, nor do they artificially stop the actions of the senses. But they do voluntarily engage their purified senses in the service of the master of the senses, as was done by Arjuna, thereby easily attaining the perfection of satisfying the Lord, the ultimate goal of all perfection. And if you remember in the Bhagavad Gita, what pleases the Lord the most?
Like unalloyed devotional service?
Yeah, but it's one specific activity in unalloyed devotional service that the Lord says it makes one dear to Him, more dear than anyone else. You got it?
Serving His devotees?
No.
When he preaches the message.
Yes, one who explains the message of the Bhagavad Gita to others.
Okay.
If you learn the art of explaining this to others, then you will please the Lord, the senses of the Lord, in the best way possible. Even if you don't do anything else. That doesn't mean that we don't want to also serve the deity. We want to chant, we want to hear, we want to, do different things, manage, or whatever we do to promote the spreading of this. But especially those devotees who explain from their mouths to the ears of others, that's very pleasing to the Lord. And He promises that they'll come back to Him and achieve pure devotional service. So if you can absorb yourself somehow or other in this, and anybody can do this, you're going around and you're buying things. Everybody has to go and buy things to keep their act together. You're working, all these things. You can gradually, when you meet people and get to know them, you can explain. And anybody who does it, they immediately feel something different. There's a taste that comes from that. That's why the book distribution is so important. Because even if we're not so expert at the philosophy, if we can learn how to convince a person to take the book and they read one page, just like we're reading, every page, every sentence is more deep than all the sentences they've heard in their whole lives, practically, the ordinary materialists. Therefore, Prabhupada's ingenious method of engaging us in satisfying the Lord was mainly two things: worshipping the deity in the temple and distributing these books and chanting Hare Krishna in public. Okay. Text 31. By further transformation of the mode of passion, the sense organs, like the ear, skin, nose, eyes, tongue, mouth, hands, genitals, legs, the outlet for evacuating, together with intelligence and the life energy, are all generated. Purport. So now we have, this is the transformation of mode of passion. The other things we heard about were transformations of mode of ignorance. The living condition, purport. The living condition in material existence depends more or less on one's intelligence and powerful life energy. Intelligence to counteract the hard struggle for existence is assisted by the senses for acquiring knowledge, and the life energy is maintained by the manipulation of the active organs, like the hands and legs. But on the whole, the struggle for existence is the exertion of the mode of passion. Therefore, all the sense organs, along with the intelligence and the life energy, prana, are different products and byproducts of the second mode of nature called passion. This mode of passion, however, is the product of the air element as described before. Text 32. O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the formation of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and the modes of nature, are not assembled. It's just like a factory assembling all the parts to make a human body. Purport. The different types of bodily construction of the living entities are exactly like different types of motor cars manufactured by assembling the allied motor parts. When the car is ready, the driver sits in the car and moves it as he desires. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, 1861. The living entity is as if seated on the machine of the body, and the car of the body is moving by the control of the material nature, just as the railway trains are moving in the direction of the controller. The living entities, however, are not the bodies. They are separate from the bodily cars. But the less intelligent material scientist cannot understand the process of assembling the parts of the body, namely the senses, the mind, and the qualities of the material modes. Every living entity is a spiritual spark, part and parcel of the Supreme Being. And by the kindness of the Lord, for the Father is kind to his sons, the living beings, individual living beings, are given a little freedom to act according to their will, to lord it over the material nature. Just as the father gives some playthings to the crying child to satisfy him, the whole material creation is made possible by the will of the Lord, to allow the bewildered living entities to lord it over things as they desire, although under the control of the agent of the Lord. The living entities are exactly like small children playing in the material field under the control of the maidservant of the Lord, nature. They accept Maya, or the maidservant, as all in all, and thus wrongly conceive the supreme truth to be feminine, goddess Durga, etc. The foolish, childlike materialists cannot reach beyond the conception of the maidservant, material nature. But the intelligent, grown-up sons of the Lord know well that the acts of the material nature are controlled by the Lord, that all the acts of material nature are controlled by the Lord, just as the maidservant is under the control of the master, the father of the undeveloped children. The parts of the body, such as the senses, are the creation of the Mahatattva, and when they are assembled by the will of the Lord, the material body comes into existence, and the living entity is allowed to use it for further activities. This is explained as follows. 33. Thus, when all these became assembled by the force of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this universe certainly came into being by accepting both the primary and secondary causes of creation. Purport. In this verse, it is clearly mentioned that the Supreme Personality of Godhead exerts his different energies in the creation. It is not that he himself is transformed into material creations. He expands himself by his different energies, as well as by his plenary portions. In a corner of the spiritual skies, Brahmajyoti, a spiritual cloud sometimes appears, and the covered portion is called the Mahat Tattva. The Lord then, by his plenary portion, as Mahavishnu, lies down within the water of the Mahat Tattva, and the water is called the causal ocean, Karana Jala. While Mahavishnu sleeps within the causal ocean, innumerable universes are generated along with his breathing. These universes are floating, and they are scattered all over the causal ocean. They stay only during the breathing period of Mahavishnu. In each and every universal globe, the same Mahavishnu enters again as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu and lies there on the serpent-like Shesha incarnation. From his navel sprouts a lotus stem, a lotus stem, and on the lotus, Brahma, the Lord of the universe, is born. Within the universe, Brahma creates all forms of living beings of different shapes in terms of different desires. He also creates the sun god, the moon god, and other demigods. Therefore, the chief engineer of the material creation is the Lord himself, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. It is he only who directs the material nature to produce all sorts of moving and non-moving creations. There are two modes of material creation: the creation of the collective universes, as stated above, done by Mahavishnu, and the creation of the single universe. Both are done by the Lord, and thus the universal shape, as we can see, takes place. Text 34. Thus all the universes remained thousands of eons within the water, the causal ocean, and the Lord of living beings entered into each of them, entering into each of them, caused them to become fully animated. Purport. The Lord is described here as the Jiva because he is the leader of all other Jivas, living entities. In the Vedas, he is described as the Nitya, the leader of all other Nityas. The Lord's relation with the living entities is like that of the Father with the sons. The sons and the Father are qualitatively equal, but the Father is never the Son, nor is the Son ever the Father, who begets. So, as described above, the Lord as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, or Hiranyagarbha, Supersoul, enters into each and every universe and causes it to become animated by begetting the living entities within the womb of material nature, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 14.3. After each annihilation of the material creation, all the living entities are merged within the body of the Lord, and after creation, they are again impregnated within the material energy. In material existence, therefore, the material energy is seemingly the mother of the living entities, and the Lord is the Father. When, however, the animation takes place, the living entities revive their own natural activities under the spell of time and energy, and thus varieties of living entities are manifested. The Lord, therefore, is ultimately the cause of all animation in the material world. Text 35. The Lord, Mahavishnu, although lying in the causal ocean, came out of it, and dividing himself as Hiranyagarbha, he entered into each universe and assumed the Virat Rupa, with thousands of legs, arms, mouths, heads, etc. Purport. The expansions of the planetary systems within each and every universe are situated in the different parts of the Virat Rupa, universal form of the Lord, and they are described as follows. So sometimes, in order for us to understand, in the beginning stage especially, that universal form is described as the external form of the Lord because it's made of external energy. But it's an imaginary form. We heard about that earlier in the second canto. It's not that if you stood back from the universe and looked at it, you'd see, Krishna standing there like this. It's an imaginary form. But still, all of the parts of his body are reflected into that universal form and act differently than they do in the spiritual world, in the sense, or look differently, in the sense that the trees are the body, the hairs of the body of the universal form. The clouds are the hair on the head of the universal form. The rivers are like the veins of the body of the Lord. These are imaginary. They're descriptions of the external form related to bodily parts to give the meditator a sense of how there's a personal form involved. And so therefore, when they see the universal form, they can begin to think of a personality rather than just a amorphous glob of energy or something. Text 36. Great philosophers imagine that the complete planetary systems in the universe are displays of the different upper and lower limbs of the universal body of the Lord. So there again, that word imagine is there. Purport. The word kalpayanti, or imagine, is significant. The Virat universal form of the Absolute is an imagination of the speculative philosophers who are unable to adjust to the eternal two-handed form of Lord Sri Krishna. Although the universal form, as imagined by the great philosophers, is one of the features of a Lord, it is more or less imaginary. It is said that the 7 upper planetary systems are situated above the waist of the universal form, whereas the lower planetary systems are situated below his waist. The idea impressed herein is that the Supreme Lord is conscious of every part of his body, and nowhere in the creation is there anything beyond his control. Text 37. The Brahmanas represent his mouth, the Kshatriyas his arms, and the Vaishyas his thighs, and the Shudras are born of his legs. Purport. All living beings are stated to be parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and how they are so is explained in this verse. The 4 divisions of human society, namely the intelligent class, the Brahmanas, the administrative class, the Kshatriyas, the mercantile class, the Vaishyas, and the laborer class, the Shudras, are all different parts of the body of the Lord. As such, no one is different from the Lord. The mouth of the body and legs of the body are non-different constitutionally, but the mouth or the head of the body is qualitatively more important than the legs. At the same time, the mouth, the legs, the arms, and the thighs are all component parts of the body. These limbs of the body of the Lord are meant to serve the complete whole. The mouth is meant for speaking and eating. The arms are meant for the protection of the body. The legs are meant for carrying the body. And the waist is meant for maintaining the body. The intelligent class in society must therefore must speak on behalf of the body, as well as to accept foodstuff to satisfy the hunger of the body. The hunger of the Lord is to accept the fruits of sacrifice. The Brahmanas, or the intelligent class, must be very expert in performing such sacrifices, and the subordinate classes must join in such sacrifices. To speak for the Supreme Lord means to glorify the Lord by means of propagating the knowledge of the Lord as it is, broadcasting the factual nature of the Lord and the factual position of all other parts of the whole body. The Brahmanas, therefore, are required to know the Vedas, or the ultimate source of knowledge. Veda means knowledge, and Anta means the end of it. According to the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord is the source of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhava. And thus the end of all knowledge, Vedanta, is to know the Lord, to know our relationship with Him, and to act according to that relationship only. The parts of the body are related to the body. Similarly, the living being must know his relationship with the Lord. The human life is especially meant for this purpose, namely to know the factual relationship of every living being with the Supreme Lord. Without knowing this relationship, the human life is spoiled. The intelligent class of men, the Brahmanas, are therefore especially responsible for broadcasting this knowledge of our relationship with the Lord and leading the general mass of people to the right path. The administrative class is meant for protecting the living beings so that they can serve this purpose. The mercantile class is meant for producing food grains and distributing them to the complete human society so that the whole population is given a chance to live comfortably and discharge the duties of human life. The mercantile class is also required to give protection to the cows in order to get sufficient milk and milk products, which alone can give the proper health and intelligence to maintain the civilization, perfectly meant for knowledge of the absolute truth. And the laborer class, who are neither intelligent nor powerful, can help by physical services to the other higher classes and thus be benefited by their cooperation. Therefore, the universe is a complete unit in relationship with the Lord, and without this relationship with the Lord, the whole human society is disturbed and is without any peace and prosperity. This is confirmed in the Vedas. Brahmano sya mukham asid bahu rajanya kritaha. And we will end our reading for tonight with that verse, Hare Krishna. So this is all technical, difficult stuff to kind of penetrate, especially the first time you hear it. But I guarantee you, if you continue to read these books and read them for the rest of your life, it'll all come and fit together. And then you'll be able to look out at the world and see it for what it actually is, including your part in it. So, reflections. Anybody? Anything that stuck out in the reading? Anything that struck you that you want to discuss, or you want to hear more about, or you want to explain what you thought?
I was reading about lording it over material nature. I've heard that a few times. And again, I was kind of thinking about that last night, about how I guess if you dedicate everything to the Lord Krishna, and you're not lording it over material, where do you draw the line at that? Like, say I'm at work, and I'm building something. I'm using the material nature of this world, the magnetic energy, to do something, to make a fan run, or I'm making it serve me. I don't know when, as long as I'm doing some useful purpose with that, or who's the judge of that?
Hare Krishna, ladies. See you later. Well, the perfection of it is to do those things for the personal pleasure of the Lord. In a temple, you build a temple, or you do something particular, specifically for the use. Like when you were doing the electricity, or maybe you haven't done it yet. Have you done it yet? The Tulsi.
The greenhouse?
Yeah, the greenhouse for Tulsi. Yeah. That's a perfect example. That's for the pleasure of Tulsi. And because Tulsi is so dear to the Lord, you are serving the senses of the Lord, because this is the essence of it, Bhakti John. The essence of it is to serve the senses and please the senses of the Lord. That's the difference between sense gratification and devotional service. So, if you're doing something for your own satisfaction, then it's sense gratification. If you're doing it for the satisfaction of the Lord, or the Lord's devotees, or the movement that's spreading the glories of the Lord, then that's devotional service. There are varieties of it. It's not just one thing. There are varieties of it. Some, the Brahmanas, they worship the deities in the temple. They're the ones that dress and decorate and say the mantras and do the offerings to the Lord, and they conduct different ceremonies and different, marriage ceremonies and funeral ceremonies and other purificatory ceremonies for their family members, when the baby's born, like that, when the baby first eats solid food, and the brahmanas will chant mantras, and there's rituals, there's different procedures to go through, so that everything becomes purified, and everyone's mind goes towards, pleasing Krishna, using the material energy to please Krishna, giving it back to Krishna. That's what it means, giving it back to Krishna. So, we're kind of caught when we're in the material world and we have a service that is like, selling, like he was like selling knives, and you're, doing electrical installations, and he's a doctor trying to cure the diseases of the material body, So it can be done in service to the Lord if you're in the right consciousness. If you're thinking, I'm doing this because obviously the Lord, who is in control of everything, is appointed me to do this duty. And if you do like that, then you think of the Lord, you think you're doing it by the Lord, and it helps. But more directly, that should lead to one to think, after one starts to meditate like that, then one should think, I should do this directly in the service of the Lord. Like the doctor in Bombay, they have a hospital that are made of all the doctors, they got together, they made a hospital. And if you go into the hospital, the first thing you see is Prabhupada's in this, in the foyer. And every morning, all the doctors and employees get together and have an arti, Guru Puja for Prabhupada every day. It's like a big temple, So like that, it's possible to do the things that you do directly for Krishna, even in the same service that you're doing it. Like he knows how to sell. We talk about this in Denver. So I'm trying to convince him, maybe if you could use that managing ability and, selling ability to learn the art of distributing books in a very far out way. Maybe you can innovate ways to distribute Prabhupada's books, Maybe we'll talk about it, because we have a lifetime of experience at this. We can help guide it. And I got, maybe you can even engage in that. Or maybe they'll need some, to figure out how to make a really nice little presentation, take a table that's all decorated properly and has, lights on it or something, and it may take electrical stuff to do it. So like that, everybody can get together and now you're doing this stuff for the farm. There's things I'm sure to be done. If you get to know Saranga Thakur and Shamasundar especially, because they're kind of like managing everything, there'll be things to do, and you can volunteer your service and do it, even not for pay, or sometimes they may pay you, but then give some of it back to the temple and take what you need and nothing more, and you become transcendental. So the basic principle of all of that detail is pure sense gratification or lust is defined in the Chaitanya Charitamrita to be something that you do for the pleasure of my senses, bottom line, and something that you do for the satisfaction, consciously, for the satisfaction of the Lord, whatever it is, that's love. That's the difference between love and lust. And there's other, there's parts of the definition of love. One of them is if there is a bona fide reason to leave a person, they do something, like sometimes when Krishna is associating with his loved ones, the gopis, he'll purposely do something to bother them. Just to see them in a different mood. Sometimes when you have a lover, you'll act in such a way to get them to look like this rather than always like this. Get some variety in there. Like the taste, make the taste more interesting. But then, if the person, even though if he does something that externally may be a reason to leave the person, and they don't leave, that's real love. And Krishna knows that, therefore he becomes purchased by that love. He can't do anything to repay that love. Is that something?
No, yeah, it is. I thought
It helped something?
Yeah. About, just putting it in. I know that Prabhupada was talking about one time about doing stuff that's not necessarily but you're doing it because your duty. You're doing it.
Yeah, so you do your duty out of duty, not for self-aggrandizement, but to do it like Arjun.
Yeah.
He ended up fighting a war. He was a warrior. He went out and fought a war for Krishna.
Right.
So in your case, if you're doing work and it's not directly for building a temple or directly like that, you can remember the Lord while you're doing it and then take a part of that fruit that you get and give it to the temple.
And also
Or give it to your spiritual master, or give it to the Vaishnavas to do some project, or something like that.
be a good example at work and be good at what you do and maybe attract people.
Yes, that's preaching.
Yeah.
That's preaching. That's even better.
Yeah, that's just, I was just kind of wondering about that last night. I want to get a better picture of how to go about that in a daily.
I think if you spend as much time as you can in the temple, with the deities, with Prabhupada, during the programs. I mean, I don't know how much you can do that, but as much as you can, and still keep your act together,
Yeah.
And come here and keeping hearing, then gradually, all the pieces will fit together. It's not that you can get it all at once. It's not possible for anyone.
It's starting to come together a lot way more than before.
Yeah. Well, I want you to know that when you came and spoke that day, a lot of the persons who were watching it, they took notes. They listened carefully and they were impressed. So you gave pleasure to a lot of devotees by doing that. And that's pure devotional service. Because serving the devotees is even more important than serving Krishna, in a sense that Krishna loves the devotees so much that he becomes pleased when we please the devotees. Another reason why, when you explain these things to new devotees, Krishna becomes so pleased, because you're bringing them into devotional service, and that's what he wants more than anything.
People are hungry for something.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much potential here with all of you, that have come and started to hear and appreciate, and it's just, I don't know how to express it. A lot of potential. Now, let's organize it. Keep it going. Keep the sound vibration going. When I come back in January, I'll stay here from January, practically, maybe except for a couple of weeks here and there, from January and on until September. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. 8-9 months I'm going to be here, doing the morning recording for the audiobook, and doing this every night. We can make so many devotees. And then organize them to diversify the activities, diversify the programs, diversify the preaching, diversify the population, even. But now I got to go and get rest early so that we're going to do are you going to be up for it? It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell yet.
I'm thankful I got at least a little bit of sleep this morning. So.
Oh, good.
I'm good.
Yeah, get to bed early.